So I want you guys to write this down. Progression is not related to perfection. What I mean by that is that a lot of students get overwhelmed with thinking that they have to master a certain scale or master a certain etude, and that's just not the case. Typically what I say is that you should master it about 80%. So when a student comes to me for private lessons, I'm looking at how they're doing their intonation, their rhythm, their articulation. At about 80%, once they get past that as far as they're doing it really well, then I say, yeah, I think you're ready to move on to the next piece. This is a really important thing because I feel like students get stuck either on one side or the other. Let me give you an example. I have some students that they feel like they can't move on from a one-line song until they've done it for at least a couple months. And that's just not very wise because there's so many things that there are to learn in the violin, and it's so important to move on to the next thing. And eventually what you're going to find is that later on you'll be able to do some of those more challenging concepts that you were struggling with later, just a matter of time. On the other side, there's also the student that feels like they should go through 3 songs a week. That can also be really dangerous because ultimately you're not really working on some of the concepts that might be in the pieces. For example, you have to work on intonation. That's where you're putting those finger spots down. You have to work on your rhythm as far as if you're doing your 8th notes, if you're doing your 16th notes properly. You have to be thinking about your articulation, how you're accenting, how you're doing certain dynamics is another one. So these are all elements of music that if you go too fast through learning a piece, you're probably going to miss those things. I would say in a piece that's about a half a page, I would highly recommend you guys to probably spend about a week learning it. If you feel like you're just way too good to do that as far as you're doing a lot of the things right within that piece, most likely then you need to start working on harder music. That's what I would say. At the same time, if you feel like you don't even know what articulation is and you can barely even play the notes of a piece, you're probably more on the other side, and I would highly recommend really trying to focus on maybe getting something a little bit easier for you. So in the last day, I showed you guys sort of the different books. I have here the Maz's book, which is a great etude. And what I would normally have my students do is play one of these per week, kind of go through it. And if they do a really, really good job, I would have them progress to the next one the following week. But typically I would say for a full page piece, it would take at least a couple weeks, I would say. That's sort of the efficient, I would say, process, and efficient. You should feel like you're being efficient if you're at that pace. Thank you so much for watching. I highly encourage you guys to implement these concepts into your scales as far as, not going on to a new scale too quick, doing some of the concepts we learned in the previous days with your scales, just being patient. Highly encourage you guys to do it as well with your etudes, as far as trying to just really work on something for at least a couple weeks or a week at the least, and just having that mindset that everything should be about 80%. You're not going to perfect everything, and that statement I said at the very beginning, perfection is not based on progression. If you guys have any questions about the violin, please email me at michael@superiorviolins.com. I'm really excited to give you guys some more knowledge and content in tomorrow's lesson. Thank you so much for watching. God bless.